and then I'll pass over to you as the host. So let me just find you over here. Yeah, so I've changed you over as the host, so you can now take control, Amrik. So thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you, Amrik, for giving your presentation.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Amrik Mahi. I've been living in Southall for the last 55 years now. Going to be 58 this year. So I was born in India, but came over when I was a little baby. So that's why I've been here 55 years. One of the biggest problems we have in Southall is that we are actually not a community. If there's a problem in Southall, different people in different areas will either stick up for themselves, but they won't stick up for others in different areas. And the biggest problem we've been having for a long, long time is that we're not a community. We call ourselves Southallians, but we're not really close to each other, and we don't really get on with each other at times. C.A.S.H came along at a time when I was suffering really badly with ill health. I couldn't walk for more than about 100 yards without having to stop. At times it felt like I was having a heart attack. And it was my daughter actually, all the way in Coventry. She said, there's this group called C.A.S.H, why don't you join them? Never heard of C.A.S.H. And then I looked online and there they were. So I joined, and then I came to one of their meetings on top of the bridge. I think that was the first time I met them, was at Southall Bridge. I had to take the bus because I couldn't walk. But when I got to know more of what Angela and the group were doing, it actually made me feel that there is other people out there suffering as well as I am, and I'm not alone in this. And that message wasn't getting out there, and I still think it's not getting out there. But that was the reason I joined C.A.S.H, was to try and promote this message that you're not alone. There's others like you who are suffering, and they want to they want to have a voice, but they can't voice anything because I think at times a lot of people are scared to have an opinion because they think that they'll get into trouble somehow. It's one of those things where the mentality of the Asians is whatever the councils and leaders and MPs say, you follow them and you don't question them in any way. So that was it is still one of the biggest problems in Southall, that we having this issue, and hence we can't get rid of Mr. Sharma or the Labour Party, because that is the voice for Southall at the moment. On joining C.A.S.H, I learned a lot about the problems that were associated with Southall Gasworks, naphthalene, and all the other dangerous gases that they were releasing into the air. This took me time to figure out what it was, what they were, and I had to do a lot of research to find out what and how they were affecting me. When I explained the symptoms to my doctor, he just gave me an asthma pump, and he gave me two: the brown one and the blue one. None of them worked, and I wrote to the council 15 times, I'd reckon, over the first year when this happened, and they did nothing. And I even explained that, for a week I went away to on holiday to Corsica, and obviously there's no pollution there, or not as much as Southall. And I was climbing mountains. After just one day of being in an open space with clean air, I was climbing mountains. I came back to Southall on the 8th day, and within, I would say, maybe 2 days, I was back to being wheezy, not being able to walk. I was putting on weight. And all these things just, it puts you down, it brings you down, because you're thinking to yourself, it's not my fault and I can't do anything about it because the powers that be won't help us. So C.A.S.H started this long fight with the council, with Public Health England, and with Berkeley. All fingers point to Ealing Council and Julian Bell. Every single person, every single member of any party, any GLC members, whatever they are now, they all point their fingers to Julian Bell, and he's the only person who is standing in our way from getting justice. He won't do it for whatever reasons. We could say he's got money in his back pocket from Berkeley, but we can't prove it. But since their leader has passed away, sadly, a few months ago, things have slightly changed. Mr. Sharma and Bell came out to support us in the public meeting a few weeks ago. And they said, we will do this for you and we'll do that for you. And we've said over and over again, the construction at Berkeley is the main cause for all our problems, all our health problems, and also all the people living there. C.A.S.H went round to some of the new houses that were built, and this was for the people who were on the council waiting list. So we visited a number of people, and I would reckon it was probably about 9 or 10 we talked to in total. All of them said the same story. Their kids are having problems breathing. Their kids are going to the hospital. Their kids are going to the doctors. Their kids are not well. They take time off school to stay at home. Because at school, which is just down the road, Blair Peach School, it's worse because there's more works going over there. So they keep their kids home, and we've said, just go and complain. Why don't you go and complain to Ealing Council and say to them, look, this bad air here, our kids are suffering, we're suffering, And it's the same answer we got from nearly all of them, which was, if we complain, we won't have a house to live in, we won't have anywhere to live in. They'll move us out to past Carlisle, somewhere where it's cheaper for them to put us up. Now, that's an embarrassment for the council, an embarrassment for human society, that these people are scared to complain because they fear of being moved out of Southall. They want to stay in Southall, but if they complain, they're going to be kicked out, which is not fair. It's not right. Julian Bell and the council, they all know this. That's why they hide behind figures made up by the Berkeley group. C.A.S.H has been asking for independent monitoring for a number of years, which we've never got. Tim kindly set up 4 monitors for us, which gave us great data for about 3 to 4 months. And it just proves the level of PM2.5 and PM10, which is the toxins, particles in the air, were very, very high. On certain days, we were reaching not just Public Health England levels, which are higher. We were reaching World Health Organization levels, which are lower than Public Health England, but we were exceeding Public Health England's own guidelines on PM2.5 and PM10. And this was over a number of days, not just once a week or something, it was over a number of days. And when we gave this data to the council, the person in charge, I can't remember his name at the moment, he retired, or he's left the council. So the policy he was going to bring in with the £750,000 they were going to they had in their pockets, he's now suddenly gone, bye-bye, I don't want to work here anymore. So now they're looking for someone else to come in to do this, take this budget on and do air quality monitoring around the Beaconsfield and Southall areas. It is a constant battle. I had to complain just this week, or was it this week? This week or last week I had to complain because the air was really bad again. You can't always notice the smell, But once it gets inside you, it's doing things inside your body which no one knows how good or bad it is. And I was going to a place again where I was walking 100 yards, 200 yards, and having to stop again. And I did this for 2 days, and in the end, I had to start taking the buses again. But then I complained to Ealing Council. Still waiting for a reply. I probably won't get one, but it's been a few days now, you know, and it's down to them. Where are C.A.S.H taking this? C.A.S.H are going as far as they can. We've got a legal argument going on at the moment, which Angela has fronted. We've written to Julian Bell an open letter. We've written to Mr. Sharma an open letter. And we've asked some questions. We've written to Dr. Sharma an open letter. And we're waiting for responses. They said they would help. So we're waiting for responses. Just one other thing before I finish is, when I asked the local government, well, the Ealing Council, I said, give me the numbers for children, people who've had asthma, who've had cancer. And I would like to know what the figures are from 5, 6 years ago to when you started the works and onwards. And I got a reply back from Ealing Council. They said the figures haven't changed. It's all about the same. I got the similar reply from Public Health England saying the same thing. They said the figures haven't changed. The community numbers have gone up. So percentage-wise, the numbers haven't risen, which is a total down-outright lie, because it took me ages to figure out how to use the system. But once you're in, it's quite manageable to navigate around it. There is a 30% increase on children going to the doctors and hospitals for chest problems, and around about a 30% increase, same for the adults in and around the local area. The average for the UK is around about 3 to 5%, I believe. So it's somewhere there. And so we are well above the national average. Julian Bell doesn't want to know. Mr. Sharma, when presented with these numbers, he just waves his hand and smiles. And Dr. Sharma, this is what I have against him, is although he's willing to help, he's got access to these numbers and he can get the proper numbers. Where we're guessing and I'm trying to navigate, he knows how to navigate the NHS system and he can get these numbers. And so far he's refused to do so. I don't know if any of you live in Brighton, but the Green Party is big in Brighton. You've got your MP there. And I believe they're doing some sort of brownfield works. You've got to stop that. That will destroy the community in Brighton. The Green Party there has to stop those works. It cannot continue, must not start, because the devastating effect it's having on not just our children and our families now, but this is going to go on for at least 2 generations. The problems we're having will go on for 2 generations. The people buying the houses, the brand new houses, 400, 500, 600,000 pounds, they're going to be smelling that stinky air for the next 25 to 50 years. We cannot allow that. You, as the Green Party members, if you're in Brighton, you cannot allow this to start. You can't do this. You must, fight this from the start and keep it going. I do hope you guys can stop it. And if you can't, and they insist on going ahead, then you must get the air monitoring in place before they start. And it's got to be independent monitoring, not their own. They give you the money, you go out and get Tim, with his help, to get independent monitoring for around the site and around the Brighton area to make sure that your people are safe. We do not want what's happening in Southall to be happening anywhere else in England. Thank you. If there's any questions, I'll take some.
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Yep.
Yep. You mentioned people are scared to speak out. Is it a cultural thing that people are worried that if they put their hands up and say there's an issue or a problem, they'll be almost like, what's the word, ostracised and sort of as victimised? Is that what you're saying?
It is. It's the MP, you could say, is a bully. He's known in Southall. He's got a lot of friends in Southall, and it's an Asian thing. It is an Asian thing. It's a cultural thing that you know. If we were back home in India, and I wanted to complain about a policeman, the first thing I'm going to get done is get my head kicked in. Why are you complaining about the policeman? You know, and it's the same sort of thing here. He's got a lot of influence, Mr. Sharma, and there's some dark places he's gone to as well, which I know about, but I can't speak about. So that is the main problem we're having, is people will not speak out against authority because they're scared. A, they're scared of losing their house, and B, they're just scared in general that, you know, if they do say something, Mr. Sharma or some of his council buddies will come round. The other thing that happens in Southall, and it happens around England anyway, is that if you want a building work done, you've got to go to the council. Now, if you're complaining against the council, you've got councillors there you would normally go to and say, excuse me, can you help me do all this? You won't get the help. You will not get the help. I've got two houses in front of me who somehow turn into HMOs. They cause so many problems. When I spoke to the owner, he said, can get you an HMO house done. If you want yours done, you can get it done. He goes, I've got people in the council. They'll get it done for you. So that's what we're fighting against. It's corruption everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for explaining. Does that apply to the younger people? Is this across the community, or do the younger people feel a bit more willing to speak out?
All right. So from my generation downwards, so the newer generation coming up, my children, they're not afraid to speak. My grandchildren, they're not afraid to speak. If my mother was here, or their grandparents, if they said, oh, we want to complain to the council, the grandparents would come in and say, no, you don't do this. These are good friends of ours. You don't complain about the council. So it is changing, but it's taking time to change. We will get there. We will get there.
Amrik, any idea when you might get a response from Onka, Sahota and Virendra, Sharma and Julian Bell? Have you kind of pressed them for a response?
I think the best person to answer that is Angela. I know she's been hard working, trying to get responses from all of them. Mm-hmm. So they said they will respond soon, but soon is a four-letter word. It doesn't mean a lot, you know. So no, Angela is pushing hard. You know, there's others in the C.A.S.H community who are pushing for a response. Angela, she wants to speak. Is that okay?
Yeah. Go ahead. I can't see her.
All right. Hi, good evening, everybody. Just to say that we had responses from Dr. Sahota and Mr. Sharma, and both have come out supporting independent air quality monitoring commissioned by Ealing Council. And they also said that C.A.S.H should have a role in appointing independent air quality monitoring. So that's quite, forward thinking from our perspective. They've also supported independent health research because it's clear that too many of us are complaining about all sorts of health symptoms which are associated with the noxious odour from the site. In relation to Public Health England, when we wrote to Dr. Sahota, we politely requested that he contacts Public Health England, because Public Health England's stance is basically it's got nothing to do with us in relation to Ealing Council taking regulatory action. but we want him to press Public Health England in relation to undertaking health research. Because I think, you know, those of us who've been affected feel like it's a ticking time bomb. And I think Amrik's quite right that a lot of people are afraid of speaking out. Although I have to say there is some change, particularly in relation to what is perceived as the overdevelopment of Southall. And there was a young woman who spoke at the public meeting, sorry, who tried to speak but couldn't speak. Her name's Rena Bim. And she is establishing an organisation called Justice for Southall. And she's been amazing because there are plans to do a housing development on Park Avenue. And for those of you who know Park Avenue, the end towards South Road is very congested. So she managed to increase the number of objections from around about 50 to 300. So I think gradually, especially the younger generation, are now beginning to speak out and say, well, no, you know, this isn't good enough. You know, this overdevelopment is really having an impact on the existing community.
That's good.
But we need to keep pressing Julian Bell because he has yet to respond. And he said to us at the meeting, and I think Jan will back me in this and Amrik, that independent air quality monitoring is going to begin this month. It's now the 5th of August, and we are none the wiser as to whether it's begun already, whether it's scheduled to begin in August. So, you know, it's interesting that he made that announcement, also the appointment of an independent air quality consultant, and we've asked for the name of the consultant, and that hasn't been released to us as of yet.
And Angela, can I ask what kind of help have Onka, Sahota and Virendra Sharma offered? What are they offering to do for you?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, they've endorsed the stance that, you know, there needs to be independent air quality monitoring. And they've gone beyond that. You know, they've said that the site needs to be shut down. And they certainly seem to be unequivocal in the view that it's Ealing Council's responsibility. You know, that for too long it's been sort of battered around between Public Health England, the Environment Agency and the council. And they're making it clear it's up to Ealing Council to step up to the mark and take action. So we'll see, you know, whether their public endorsement leads to Julian Bell taking the right kind of action.
That is good, yes. Well, I suppose we'll have to watch and see what they're willing to do.
Certainly.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Can I ask a question? I was wondering if if you got an update on how because some people have already been moved into the Gasworks site, haven't they? I just wondered if you've had making much contact with them and how they're getting on. The people who've actually been moved in.
They've been, some of them, very badly affected. And we've been around the social housing at least a couple of times, knocked on doors. And, you know, people have spoken out and said, you know, they've noticed eye irritation, throat irritation. And there's a young mum who said, it's really affected my daughter. You know, I've taken her to hospital to find out, you know, what's causing her breathing difficulties. And she said, I've complained to Catalyst, I've complained to the child's school, which is on Beaconsfield Road, and nobody wants to know. But I think, as Amrik said, the people who live in the social housing, you know, they may have been on a waiting list for some time, they may have been homeless. And I think they are quite kind of like reticent to speak out in public.
Thank you, Angela. Do we have any more questions? Otherwise, we'll move on to Tim.
I've got one that's probably going to apply to Tim as well, actually, if that's all right. Because I cycled past the site on yesterday morning, and it was obvious, even by the canal, you did get that kind of hydrocarbon smell. my eyes were watering. You know, I didn't feel good, and I guess we know, and then it kind of it carried on further past the site. So I was just wondering if maybe someone's got some sort of background data to show this kind of spike, because we know the air quality is poor across the whole of London, really, and we hit those, we exceed those WHO limits, and the national limits quite quickly. But it'd just be interesting to see how much extremely bad, unfortunately, the air is there. So maybe that's something Tim's going to come to in a minute.
Well, sorry, can I just say that? Can you hear me, guys? All right, yep. I would say that's a difficult one, because one of the problems we have is the people on the site are very loath to release any information whatsoever regarding the levels of the pollutants or contaminants.
Okay, so you just kind of get guessing, I suppose.
No, like the trouble is, I'll come into, you're preempting. No, you're spoiling it. Right. I'll come on to my presentation. Right. Yeah,
I'll ask at the end.
Yeah, and if I don't answer it, seriously, if I don't answer it, then please remind me, because I got quite a lot to go through. So please make a note of it. And do ask me, for goodness sake. Yeah, I might not know the answers to everything, but I'll give it my best shot.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions, or shall we move on now?
We've got a question from Daljeet which came into the chat. He asked, are the other Southall activists, or are there other Southall activists supporting C.A.H? 2019 saw lots of activists coming together to commemorate Blair Peach and so forth.
Amrik or Angela, would one of you like to take that?
I think the simple answer is no. There have been on and off help from some Labour Party groups, but from actual Southall residents or Southall groups, no. I asked at the Southall Gurdwara, the ones who hand out all the free food around the communities, because they came to an event, Southall cleanup event on the Green. And I said to him, surely, you know, you've got people living on Beaconsfield Road who are suffering. Why are you helping this Berkeley group in this way by cleaning up? Surely it's a bad name for you. He goes, prove it. Prove that they're doing anything wrong. Money talks. There's a lot of money being floated around.
Can I say one thing? Can I, with reference to that, and you might be able to, can you hear me? Yeah. With what we found when we were doing our round, so to speak, was that, like, you had some other groups, but they were getting funding from Berkeley Homes and stuff like that. So they stopped supporting us, because then they would that was taking their cash flow away. And you know, myself and Angela, we went into a local gym and asked if we can put some of our leaflets down, and we were told no, because Berkeley Homes wouldn't like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would also endorse what Amrik and Jan has said. You know, if you're talking about the long-standing activists that campaigned about the death of Blair Peach and all the racial atrocities that went on back in the 70s, they certainly haven't been vocal in supporting us. It could be to do with the fact that they don't understand that this is an environmental injustice, which is simply another form of racial injustice. But I have asked the question on Twitter to one particular activist, and I never got a response. We were approached to support in relation to the Tudor Rose, but I had an issue with that because Southall Community Alliance were also involved, and they have never spoken out about what's going on. And I think Jan's alluded to the fact that, you know, this organisation is sponsored in some way by Berkeley Group. And I think, you know, reading Virendra Sharma's letter, he talks about Berkeley Group making investments, community investments. You've actually asked him in reply which organisations have received funding by Berkeley Group. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it's a big issue that there are activists with a long-standing history and experience of fighting racial injustice, and they are not supporting C.A.S.H, or more importantly, the community who are dying. You know, it doesn't have to be an attack by the National Front or the far right, but this is an abuse of the community who are quite disadvantaged and are struggling, to be quite frank. It's definitely an eye-opener for me that we've had greater affinity from campaign groups in East London than we've had from people who've had a long association with Southall.
That is sad, yes. Any other questions, or should we move on now to Tim's presentation? Okay. Thank you, Amrik and Angela and Jan, for your participation. So Amrik, would you mind if you go to participants? So if you look at the bottom and it says participants, if you click on that, and it will show you a list of people, and it will show you that you're the host. So if you go down to Tim's name, and it should say more, if you click on the more, you'll have make host, the option to make him the host. Lovely, Tim, you're now the host.
Right, okay. Now I wanted to share my screen. Can you hear me and see me all right, guys? Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I wanted to go and share my screen. So what do I click on share screen?
Yeah,
okay,
share screen.
Okay, and then I've got it. Okay, I think that's what I want. Right, I want to go into a window and I want to do a slideshow. Start for the first slide. Right, okay, can you see that, guys? Is that all right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, it says air quality in Southall, Tim Webb on my Zoom call. All clear to everyone, yep? What I'll do to time myself, I've got my able assistant Alexa here. Alexa, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I listen once I hear the wake word.
Alexa, timer for 14 minutes.
14 minutes, starting now.
Okay, right, so here we go. Eyes down, look in. So I'm going to go into who am I and what is my role, my involvement with the C.A.S.H Southall Group. What do we mean by air quality and air pollution? Very ambitious, this. What do we measure and why and how do we measure it? I'm going to talk about gases and particles. I'll throw some abbreviations in there, which I'll explain. I'll talk about the emissions thresholds. Now, these are very important to understand. These absolutely critical. I'll give you my summary, only a personal summary of the situation in Southall, the situation pre and post COVID-19, and a questions and answers session. So we should finish by midnight. Is that fine? No, I'm joking. Right, right. Okay, so who am I and what am my role? Well, I'm what's defined as a citizen scientist. That's a non-professional scientist. I'm retired. I'm not paid to do this. I do this as a hobby. And what I do is I focus on analysing and collecting data relating to air quality, particularly what I call pollution episodes. And I run networks of air quality sensors. I've got several networks across the southeast. My involvement with C.A.S.H, well, I was watching the news one day and I thought, there's a group of people who may need some help and advice. So I've made contact with Angela and with David and some other people and Rick as well. Now, my biggest concern was there was no access to any independent air quality for you guys, and that concerned me. So what I did was, almost a year ago to the day, I set up a network of sensors. And what I've been looking at ever since, spending hours doing this, I can assure you, is identifying some of the reasons for the peaks in the pollution episodes. What is air quality? Here we go. Right. It's defined as any change to the composition of the air caused by natural or man-made sources and contamination of the atmosphere. So it's really anything that modifies the natural characteristics of the atmosphere. And in a nutshell, how clean or polluted the air is. It's as simple as that. What do we measure and why? Well, what we do is we measure gases and particles in the air. Now, predominantly in places like Southall or in London, the focus is on measuring gases, that's vehicle emissions from exhaust pipes, which I'll go into of vehicles. We also measure particles suspended in the air. These come from things like tyre wear, bonfires, construction sites, etc. And why do we measure it? Well, there are two main reasons we measure it. Because we want to determine if the levels or gases in the air exceed the safe levels or thresholds, which have been set by the EU and by the World Health Organization. And finally, the most important one, some could argue, because the UK has to meet EU directives. How do we measure the gases in the air? Well, there's two main ways. We use either continuous monitoring sites, which as the name suggests, are continually collecting and reporting data. There are 4 locations in Ealing, but 5 sites. And we also use things called diffusion tubes on lampposts that some of you might be familiar with. Now, with the air monitoring, the main way of doing it, and there are 4 stations all over in the east of the borough. These are use high-grade sensors, very expensive air monitoring stations. They provide continuous monitoring, but they're very expensive to deploy and to maintain as well, because they have to be maintained to an absolute criteria of scientific calibration. They're very sensitive instruments. They also use diffusion tubes. Now, people like Mina might be familiar with these. This is where you put a glorified test tube on a lamppost. You leave it there for 2 to 4 weeks. It's sent away to a lab, and they send the result back to you to tell you what evidence there is of traffic pollution, or NO2, nitrogen dioxide. It'll give you the average for that period. We now move on to what is it, car exhaust. Now, the main one that gets measured is something called nitrogen dioxide. Don't worry too much about this, by the way. This is, as far as the chemicals, I mean, this is where you get the gases that come out of the exhaust pipe. These are unburnt, these are from the combustion process in the form of nitrogen dioxide of gas, or something called VOCs, which are volatile organic compounds. And when these particles, when these gases mix in the air, they produce particles like dust or soot, and they also produce these mysterious things called particulate matter, and they're graded according to either PM2.5 or PM10. Again, I'll go into what that means. Now, what is particulate matter? Well, in short terms, it's anything that's in the air that isn't a gas. So it's a collective name for all the particles present in the air. This is what I major on measuring. While the larger particles are noticeable, smaller particles released from, say, vehicle emissions, cigarette smoke, and they're generally not visible because they're very, very small particles. So these are, so what you've got in the air is gas particles, or you've got solid or liquid particles. Now, particulate matter, which is my specialism, they're graded according to the size. Now, to give you an idea of the size of what we're looking at, suspended in the air, a human hair, I've still got a few, is 50 to 70 microns in diameter. A beach sand, as you can see there, is 90 microns. A micron, by the way, is a millionth of a meter. And so the particles we're looking at, PM2.5, are what's called 2.5, means they're 2.5 microns in diameter, or 2.5 millionths of a meter, very small particles. And they come from the combustion particles, they come from organic compounds, metals, etc., floating in the air. The one that's more affected you guys, I think, would be PM10. These are the larger particles from dust, typically associated with the emissions from construction sites. So PM10 is 10 microns, PM2.5 is 2.5 microns. Some are emitted directly from a source. They're known as primary pollutants. Other ones are secondary pollutants. So secondary pollutants are where you get the emissions from a car exhaust. It reacts with the gases in the air and produces particles. Now, these very small particles, this is the PM2.5, have got the potential to travel for hundreds of miles. They can stay suspended in the air for hours or for days. The PM10, which are the larger ones, larger in terms of microscopic particles, they're dust particles, and they are larger. They travel far shorter distances, and they're typically associated with road dust or construction site activity. So that's the PM2.5 and the PM10, NO2 car emissions. Now, why are only in the boroughs, in most parts of the UK, only PM10 and NO2 are reported? Because local authorities have got a legal and statutory requirement to report these. There is no such requirement to report the smaller particles, PM2.5. Hence in Ealing, to my knowledge, there is no one reporting PM2.5 apart from myself. All of the official monitoring sites only cover the larger particles and the car emissions. And they also use diffusion tubes to fill in the gases from the cars as well. Now what happens is, now we're now going to go on to the measure. How do we measure particles? So this is where you come on to Tim's famous paperclip and a washing machine, all right? So if we assume for a moment that a paperclip weighs 1 gram, yeah? If you've got a washing machine, you've got to imagine it's a cube, all right? I know it's not strictly accurate, but imagine you've got a washing machine which is 39 by 39 by 39 inches. That's the size of a cubic meter. There's nothing inside the washing machine. So what you do is you cut the paperclip into 1 million pieces. You've got to use your imagination here. So you place one piece inside a washing machine, and what you've got there is 1/1,000,000th of a gram or a microgram. And what they do is express that as 1 microgram of a particle in a cubic meter of air. So that's 1/1,000,000th of a gram is in a cubic meter of air. That's what the measurements are based on. And if someone wants to ask me later on, how do we measure particles? The answer is with great difficulty. This is why the equipment is so expensive, because you're measuring and weighing particles in the air that are 1/1,000,000th or above of a gram. Now, this leads us on to the EU directives and the World Health Organization. Now, what happens is that the World Health Organization make recommendations. Member states within the EU basically ignore those recommendations, go their own way and come out with a directive. So what happens is, if you look at PM2.5, the safe limits, the World Health Organization or the WHO say 10 million particles in a cubic meter. The European Union says, no, we can't do that, not achievable, we go for 25. So the limit is 25 millionths of a gram suspended in a cubic meter of air. And that should not be exceeded as an annual target. There's also an hourly target as well, but people go on the annual one. The way you remember it is 2.5 is 25 millionths of a gram. PM10, which is larger, there's a limit on this of 40 micrograms. Now, the reason for the difference is fairly straightforward, because the PM2.5 particles are smaller, are deemed to be more harmful where they enter the human body, and hence the limit for those is lower. So that's why the PM2.5 limit is higher. You also get NO2, and you've got 2 targets for the emissions of the gases. You've got an annual target of 40 micrograms over the course of a year, or it shouldn't be exceeded more than X number of times a year. So if you get your head around that, then you begin to understand why in Ealing people don't want these measurements to be known, because the chances are these measurements have been exceeded. So they certainly aren't meeting the WHO recommendations, and I believe they certainly are failing the EU directives on air quality. And if you fail the directives on air quality, you've got to do quite a lot of explaining, okay? Now, what happens in Ealing, there's been known problems in the whole borough since the year 2000, when the council realised they were liable to fail their targets for nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter. So they declared the whole borough as something called an air quality management area, which means they've got to put a plan in place of how they're going to improve the air quality. Now, if you fail your targets, that's flagged up to central government. It's also flagged up to the EU. And I think you may get some idea now of why they are loath to report problems in this part of the borough. I think it might begin to make sense now. Now, the situation in Southall is there's no official data related to PM2.5 or PM10. No one wants to measure it. There could be some NO2 monitoring going on with test tubes. The PM10 sensors at Waterside development, the data's not published from these. And I've got a network of unofficial sensors, and these indicates at times there are very high peaks of dust and other particles that could be harmful. The problem is I haven't got the sophistication to confirm what these particles are, so I can't tell you what they are. So typically, this is a day, this is the Monday, the 23rd of September last year. 3 of the sensors, you'll see there how the construction site, you have a sudden peak. Now bear in mind, the target we're looking for with PM10 is 40 micrograms. You're looking at nearly 500 micrograms. So that is well above the EU and World World Health Organization limits, or the WHO limits. You had a later episode there in the day and another episode there. And because they're very specific and can change for the locality, in some parts of Southall you may notice the dust, other parts you don't. And the reason behind that is typical construction site, all the dust in the air. The reason is, and this is from a few days ago, these were peaks that were taking place at about 9 o'clock in the morning, taking place about 11:30, and you can see there how they were working on the site, not too far from one of my sensors. The dust clouds are lifted in the air because it's dry and it's dusty. And you can see there, the dotted line there is the PM2, PM10 limit, so well above the limit. The construction site, what my sensors indicate are the concentrations vary at different locations and heights above the ground. Remember, you've got small particles and large particles. The larger particles can sometimes be suspended quite high, other times they're not. It highlights the nature of dust peaks. You get very high peaks over very short periods. The pollution episodes can be very localized, hence somebody in one part of the road would notice the dust peaks, somebody else wouldn't. So they're often picked up on one sensor, not the others. Now, I've been monitoring the situation for a year now, and I can tell you, you don't need it, it's still an ongoing issue. Now, when we look at the highlights, or the lowlights, you could say, on PM2.5 and 10, now look at the back of my records, the worst month in London, not just Southall, this is wherever you go in London, is generally October. And what happens there is you've got 10 micrograms for the PM2.5 and 26 micrograms due to fireworks and bonfires. Small particles in the air, hang around for hours and cause the air quality to be affected. You also got, April was a bad month for air pollution. This is where we blame our friends in the Netherlands and in France, which I can go into. That's the farmers in Netherlands and in France. The best month was July. So I hope you took advantage of the, sorry. Alexa, stop. Okay. The annual mean is well within the EU and WHO limits. It's 2.5 and 14. And what I find is no obvious connections between odours and the peaks I see, which leads me by the issues. Now, the reason is you're saying, well, Tim says it's fine. It's within the EU or WHO limits. It's because I'm only collecting data relating to PM2.5 and PM10. There are lots of other pollutants in the air, things like VOCs, volatile organic compounds. You've got ultrafine particles, sulfur dioxide, PAHs. The problem is each of these needs specialist monitoring equipment. So if you wanted to monitor everything in the air, to say that at the moment I'm monitoring PM10 and PM2.5, probably about 20%. They probably offered you NO2, which is probably another 10%. So you would get a picture of what's 30% of the pollutants in the air. What you need is monitoring to measure the other 70% of what's in the air. So you've got metals, you've got VOCs, PAHs, you've got UFPs, ultrafine particles. This is to get the whole picture of what's in the air. You need to monitor this, or someone needs to monitor the whole picture for you. Right, I'll press on. Right, so in Ealing, how many monitoring sites are there? Well, it's open for debate, this one. Now, you used to have 14. They closed 9 of them down. So you're left with 1 at Acton Vale. You're left with 1 at the Hanger Lane Gyratory, 2, possibly 1 at Horn Lane, open to debate, and 1 at Western Avenue. And someone can ask me later on, why do they close them down? There are several schools of thought on that. Now, when we're looking at what does a Horn Lane one look like, there it is by the bus stop in Horn, by A.H. Key Flooring, who sponsor this presentation. Not really. So this is the one in Horn Lane. That's a very important one because that reports data to DEFRA and the EU. You wouldn't want to upset the EU. Well, when we leave the EU, I don't know what happens. There's also another site. This is by the sewage works, Acton Sewage Pumping Station. Could be some interesting aromas there. We won't go into that. There's another monitoring. Oh, that's been off the air, by the way, since the 13th of July. Okay. There's a very shy sensor in Hanger Lane behind the hedge. It doesn't appear very often, that one there. It's very shy. There it is behind the hedge there. And finally, you've got one in Western Avenue. That's a monitoring site there. Now, what's happened with pre and post COVID, that car emissions or NO2 went down as expected, but they decrease anyway in warmer weather because you get less people using their cars, more people walking, and diesel engines give less emissions in warmer weather and more emissions in cold weather. And PM10 emissions also decrease generally as well. Okay, so that's the situation. Lockdown traffic levels also went down. HGVs are the blue, that went down. You've also got car traffic went down, and light goods vehicles or vans also decreased as well. So that's why the NO2 emissions improved. Almost there. Thanks for listening and watching. It's not the easiest subject to take in, so please, if you've got any questions, do ask. And I've been studying this for 3 years, and even bits of it mystify me as well. I've avoided mentioning the health risks because I'm not really a qualified person to advise people on this. And finally, any questions? Shall I stop sharing now? Is it all right?
Yeah, that's good. So Jeremy had a question, didn't you, Jeremy?
Go on, Jeremy, fire away.
I think you already partly answered this, but I said, will the government no longer have to meet EU safety thresholds for air quality?
I couldn't comment. I don't think that's been considered, Jeremy, at this stage. I think with everything going on with Brexit, I couldn't really comment on it. The answer is I don't know what on earth is happening there. I keep out of politics on purpose. Your guess is as good as mine. I've no idea. Sorry.
Any other questions? Darren, was your question answered, or did you want to ask that again?
Thanks, Tim. I loved all of this. I guess the answer is no, isn't it? It's like there's so many unknowns, there's so many variables, and we haven't got the sophisticated equipment that is very expensive to do.
Yes, I would say we have got the equipment, and the equipment could be deployed. It's the political will to make it happen. That's my take on it, because I think what you've got in Ealing probably goes back to about 2005, when you had the incident with the infamous Horn Lane waste disposal site. Was it called a waste transfer site? Anyone remember it? Horn Lane over towards Acton Way. There was a waste monitoring site set up near Acton railway station, near the sidings, I think. Somebody probably correct me on that. And I think what it was, this became known for a while as the most polluted road in London, and got flagged up for all the wrong reasons. It got flagged up, and as a result of that, the Horn Lane Monitor is one of only 12 in London, and the only one in Ealing that reports information directly to the UK government and the EU to confirm how, in Ealing and on behalf of the UK, how well the air quality is being managed, because it was absolutely diabolical. It was up there in lights for all the wrong reasons. And I think one of the reasons that you don't see air monitoring in Southall is because if we look at what happened in Horn Lane, at the end of the call, if you Google Horn Lane and Google pollution, you get a drift for the story. I think what happens is that they're worried because that was dust from construction related work. I think my take on it could be, and I could be very cynical here, I think they don't want to give you air quality in Southall because they're worried that suddenly out of the blue will come this massive pollution problem, and someone will have to explain why have you let it come to this point? Why is it affecting the health of the people? And more importantly, what are you going to do about it? Because one of the issues with these particles, and bear this in mind, the PM10 or the construction site dust particles are not too bad, okay? Because the body's natural hairs in your nose and your system can filter them out. The problem with particles are the smaller ones, the PM2.5, because I was in touch with a professor in Singapore recently, and I asked him a basic question. I said, can I ask you, Professor, you're a very clever man. You know a lot of things that I don't know. He said, and I said to him, what happens if you've got these PM2, if you inhale the PM2.5 particles and they get into your lungs, into your bloodstream, are they ever ejected from your body? And he went very quiet. He said, I can't really answer that one. So it didn't give me great confidence, but I think the problem or issue is, return to your question there, so return to your question, I think it's more the political will that they don't want to measure it because they are aware there's an issue. They're trying to keep a lid on an issue. And once the issue is into the open, there are a lot of awkward questions going to be asked, not just at the UK government level, but on a wider European level, and you could have the World Health Organization or WHO involved saying, basically, what is going on in Southall? Why has this been allowed to happen? That could be one take on it.
Angela was asking about the sensor in Horn Lane, and why is that the only one that reports to the EU? And I think you...
Right, well, yeah, sorry, right, okay, right. There are 3 different monitoring networks in the UK, okay? Official ones, okay? There's the one that Ealing use, which is run by London Air, which is managed by King's College London. Now that reports data, and that is, how can I put it? It's a bit iffy at times, okay? And there's another network run, some of the London boroughs use that network to report their data. So basically, they get their monitoring stations managed for them. Okay, so they outsource it, that's the word. There's another network run by Air Quality England. Some of the London boroughs use that one. Now that is used for local government and for UK reporting. Now, you also have a third network run by the DEFRA, which is, I've got it written down here, I keep on forgetting this, run by the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Now, this network is the most important network. It's run by DEFRA, and it contains about 140 air monitoring stations nationwide, and there are 12 in London, I think it is, 14 in London. One of them happens to be the one in Horn Lane, because my take on it was that when there were the pollution incidents in 2005 that went on to about 2016 or so, that was such a problem for Ealing, it got escalated to a very senior level, and that is now used as one of the sites to report how the UK is complying with its EU directives on air quality, because it was such an almighty problem, particularly with PM10. Does that answer the question, or have I gone off at a tangent there? Sorry, go on.
Are you happy with that answer, Angela?
Have I answered your question, Angela, or not? Sorry,
yeah, I think so.
I think so.
What I was going to say, and I don't know to which network the data is reported to, I think at some stage Ealing Council was monitoring nitrogen dioxide in Southall.
Yes, they were. They had. If you think, share my I might have to share my desktop again. There were. I mean, I'll just go. There were 14. There were 14 monitoring sites in Ealing, right, in the borough, and there were 3 monitoring sites in Southall, right. One by the railway line, just to the south of the Waterside site. That was set up to determine the pollution put out by trains, namely diesel trains. Right. And that project ran for a number of years, and that sensor was disconnected and decommissioned a few years ago. Okay, there was also another sensor in the grounds of Blair Peach School. Yeah. Right. Now, the reason I got involved in this project, because I'm a very suspicious person, I'm a very cynical person as well. And when people say an air monitoring site is shut down, I like to know, well, why was it shut down? Was it money? Was it because it could have been embarrassment that you had that had it stayed, it's operating, would it have been embarrassment to have a high pollution readings near a school because companies don't like to poison children? Oh, people like me, they don't worry about, because I'm expendable. But you should never poison children or young people, because and I think that what happened was that site was taken off the air before the construction site work started at Southall Waterside. Now, some might say that's coincidence. Some might say it wasn't coincidence. I'll leave it to people.
I think the reason, Tim, the council gave was that the equipment came to the end of its working life and was therefore decommissioned.
Yes, that could have a bearing on it. I've got to go onto my other PC. Hold on. Yeah, that's right. I could be doing the council a complete disservice, and that could be the truth. I don't know. I don't know is the answer. I can't say for certain. But what I do notice is that generally, with sites, the number of monitoring sites is rapidly diminishing. When they come to the end of their useful life, they don't seem to be willing or able to put a replacement station elsewhere in the area. They just disappear without trace. And I find that a little bit, what's the word? Strange. I mean, maybe I'm being cynical, I don't know, maybe I'm a cynical old guy.
Well, I think it's very worrying because there is a huge amount of construction in London, and we all know we need it because of housing. I live in South Acton, and I must have been in when that I moved in 2013, and when that Horn Lane incident was happening, presumably I was breathing in some of that lovely air then, but towards the end of it.
Right.
But now South Acton, where I am, huge development, Acton Gardens, and it's good. It's good because it needed doing, but it's really ongoing, and it's enormous amounts. I can taste it in the air, I can smell it, and I find it just really worrying that really, obviously in Southall, terrible, I feel there should be some way that we could all really get together and just say enough's enough. Yes, we need houses, but we cannot have houses, car pollution, everything that, and then presumably pollen comes into air pollution too to some extent, but you always see pollen levels high on the Met Office thing, or moderate, but you always see air pollution low, and I'm thinking, well, where does that come from? It's clearly not low. It's high. I can sense it's high.
Yes,
and
that's a very.
And
Sorry,
that's
go on.
Stuff you can smell and taste.
I think you raised a very good point there, because for most of London and for most of the UK, no one really knows what the air quality is like. Because if you say, for example, right, you got lucky one day and they installed an all singing, all dancing air monitoring station just say 50 yards from your house or 50 meters from your house, okay? What you find in air quality terms is that sensor gives an indication what the air quality is like in that area. If you go down the road half a mile, the air quality could change and will change alarmingly. And what I found with my sensors, now what I do is I take the reverse approach to get round to answer your question. I take the reverse approach of what the authorities do, okay? Because I've always been a bit of a maverick and a bit of a rebel. and I decided, right, what I do is I saturate an area with sensors. Okay, I go to town on it. I put like 10 or 12 in an area, different heights, in front of a house, side of a house, high down, low down, in the garden, near the road, etc. And what I find is that even if you've got, say, 3 sensors on the side of a house, the pollution levels will vary according to the height, because the particles are suspended in the air, the time of day, whether it's been raining, whether it's dusty, etc., etc. And I think with building, the problem is this, right, that if you've got a construction site and you don't follow the correct procedures for dampening down the soil, as somebody told me recently, if you don't have barriers around the excavations, then it's going to raise, particles are going to be raised in the air. And I think the problem is with construction is a messy business. It creates dust. Cement is the worst, because you've got cement works on the site as well, but you as well. Cement dust is another one as well. And the problem is, if you want more houses, and you want more building, and you want more unaffordable housing, as I call it, being cynical here, then unfortunately, it's going to create dust, it's going to create pollution. There is no way around it. You cannot have a dust-free construction site. They don't exist. I'm sorry, and the problem with Southall, this is what worried me, and the reason I got involved initially was because I'm in the somewhat unfortunate position, or fortunate position, that I've studied firsthand in my area a major pollution event. And boy, is it scary. You don't want to go through one, I tell you. Oh, they are scary. And I determined after that to find out how far do these particles travel? Where do they, in the words of Cotton Eye Joe, where do they come from? Where do they go? And the answer is they travel a long way. And I sort of got to thinking, well, let's find out a bit more about what these particles are, because my concern with the construction site at Waterside is not so much the volume of particles, but what are these particles? Because it's a known contaminated site. And I've had several conversations with the likes of Angela and with Amrik as well. And my concern would be that when these particles are in the air, they could contain all kinds of contaminants that are flowing over the site boundary and could be entering people's houses, and people are breathing them in because you're living there, guys, and you're breathing in a cocktail of goodness knows what. And there seems to me a conspiracy is a bit of a strong word to use, but it's obviously people don't want you to know what you're breathing in. And I think the reasons for that are fairly self-explanatory.
Tim, could I ask you to say a little bit about fires in back gardens? Because Tim and I had a chat.
Oh, fires. Oh, don't get me started on fires in back gardens. Right, okay, now, I got into a big debate. Oh, my goodness me. Right, here we go. Right. Don't start you on fires in back gardens, they say. Don't get me off on this one. Right, okay. I was on Twitter, and I found during lockdown, okay, now in lockdown, people say as the air quality got better. The answer I give it depends. From the NO2 or the car emissions point of view, yes, because there were fewer vehicles on the road. Now, what happened was after lockdown, air quality got worse in certain boroughs, where I live in Bromley, for example. And what people were doing was they were at home, they were on furlough, whatever you call it, and they decided, oh, let's burn some rubbish. Let's clear out a garden. And what happened was that garden fires and bonfires became a big issue. So just after lockdown, although car pollution went down, PM2.5 and PM10, the particles in the air, actually went up. And I got into several debates with people about this. And they all said, isn't it marvellous the air quality has got worse? To which I said, cobblers. No, it hasn't. It's got worse. Sorry, they said it's got better. I said, no, it hasn't got better. It's got worse. Because the problem with these, if you're burning rubbish in your garden, it's going to travel beyond your garden, and you're going to have people at home, and the pollutants and the carcinogens that you're burning are going to enter their homes. And I think that what's happened is, no doubt about it, that under lockdown, the air quality as far as particulate matter, this was in April, also got worse due to the farmers in the Netherlands. Okay, so if anyone's from the Netherlands or from Belgium or France, I apologise. Okay, now the problem being, every year the farmers in France decide to put loads of fertiliser on their ground, and the farmers in Belgium and it's northern France, Belgium and Netherlands, they put fertiliser on their ground. That fertiliser contains ammonia. That reacts with the chemicals in the air and produces particles. These particles then travel across the English Channel because the particles don't realise that we've left the European Union. So, you know, they still keep going. They enjoy freedom of movement across the Channel. And where we are in the southeast, if the wind, don't laugh, it's a serious matter, this. It's a serious matter. Right. And these particles then travel across the Channel. And we had several days of episodes. We had one recently, we had one last Friday. We had some in early April as well, where these particles then, if the wind is blowing the right way, they export their pollution to us. Now we get our own back, because when the wind's blowing the other way, we export our pollution to them. Now the problem is there's an awful lot. That's why the air quality in April got worse, because it's what the farmers put on their fields. And so this is a problem, because a lot of problems with air quality, to be honest, the problems you've got in Southall, I suspect, don't all originate in Southall, because the air is constantly moving. And the quote, I think someone very clever said to me once, was the air that you're breathing now could have been in Paris 6 hours ago. So the air is constantly moving, it's not static, and all these particles are traveling around, and when they're in the air, they are mixing, and due to very complex chemical reactions that I don't pretend to understand, the gases turn to particles, more particles are produced. And so a lot of it happened in April. April was a particularly bad month because this is what they call imported continental pollution, which is one of my specialist subjects. So don't get Tim started on imported continental pollution.
Thanks, Tim. Angela just said that there was something in the vicinity of Scots Road and Brent Road today. There was a thick haze along both roads and a burning smell. Do you have any monitors in that area?
I couldn't possibly comment where my monitors are.
Oh,
I don't. Now, the problem I have, I'll look now. I'll look at my other PC. Hold on. To answer your question, one of the problems I've got, right, is in the past I used to say to people, "Have you noticed?" So I would see a spike on my monitors at a peak at a particular time. So today, then there were some peaks at 11:24, and there were some peaks at 11:42. I'm very precise, like a train service. This. Now, the problem is that that could be dust from the site. My monitors aren't that sophisticated. I'm sorry to spoil it for you folks. I mean, you know, they're not that clever. A bit like the person who builds them. They're not pleased. They're not as good as people think they are. So what happens is that because I've got to admit someone. Thank you. The answer is that because there is an odor, that is a gas. My monitors predominantly only measure particles in the air, and these particles can either be dust particles or they could be particles produced as a consequence of the reactions between certain gases. So generally, to answer your question, if someone reports an odor at a particular time, I go and look at my data. Generally, I don't see any correlation whatsoever. Sorry to spoil it for you, but I've really been honest with people, because if you want to measure things like VOCs, volatile organic compounds, or ultrafine particles, you need specialist equipment to look at gases. And sometimes this equipment either doesn't exist because you're looking at the cutting edge of technology, because what it comes down to is the smaller the particles, the more difficult they are to measure accurately, because there is recognized problems with some monitoring sites. And that is that when the air is monitored, what they do, if you're monitoring, say you want to monitor the air in your road, right? You want to do it properly, right? So you go and buy an air monitor, a cheap one for about £10,000, okay? £10,000 a cheap one, okay? Then what this will do is this will dry out the air, because you've also got liquid droplets in the air. You don't want them being counted as well. So what happens in sophisticated monitors, dry out the particles, and the water droplets only measure the particles. However, because it's so sensitive, it may at the same time be drying out the wrong particles. And so that's why it's very difficult to measure gases or particles and measure them accurately in real time. So what they do is they have a method where they generally have test tubes. These are left out for a month or a week or so. These then soak into the chemicals, the gases, and you can look at individual gases, what they call 10-ax tubes. I think, Angela, we've discussed about 10-ax tubes, haven't we? Yeah, 10-ax tubes, and they are very specific to a particular sort of gas, but unfortunately, it's not possible to monitor them in real time. You leave them out for a month, you get an average reading. Companies love them because no one wants to report peaks in readings. An average reading or a mean is far better. And with a lot of gases, you can only measure them in a concentration level over a month or a week. So it's very difficult to get an accurate measure. So if you smell something in the air, it's very difficult to pin down where that originated from, what it consists of, and how harmful is it. It's not an easy process. Now, I'm not defending Southall Council. I'm not defending, you know, the powers that be who monitor, but monitoring of some of the gases that you guys are probably experiencing is not easy. It could be done, like anything. If you throw enough money and enough resources at anything, within reason, most things can be achieved. And I think what exists in Southall is there isn't the political willpower to do that.
Thank you, Tim. Does anyone else have any questions?
I've not bamboozled people too much, have I?
This is really cool, Tim. I love it. No, it really is.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, just give a contribution at the end.
Okay, all right. I've got on my website, I've got the widget for the nearest air sensor that's working in Brentford. So this is all to help put it in context. However, we know we've got air pollution monitors run by the council or run by Berkeley Group in this site? Did we not?
We have
Right.
a number of to my knowledge, I can't speak from, because I had some documents which I got hold of, which gave me the location of the sensors. And as far as I know, there are at least 3 positioned along the northern boundary where the boundary of the site meets Beaconsfield Road. Beaconsfield, is it Beaconsfield or Beaconsfield?
Beaconsfield.
Beaconsfield Road, okay, Beaconsfield Road, yeah. They've got sensors there. However, they won't release the data. And I fully understand why they won't release the data, because when site monitoring is carried out, it's predominantly for the people who work on site to make sure it's safe for them. Now, what happens with their monitors, if they go above a certain threshold, alarms go off, they stop work, and they have to work out what it is that's caused the pollution episode. Now, they are unwilling to share that data. And the reason when I dig a bit deeper is not because they don't want to share it, it's because they're prevented from sharing it under the terms of their insurance policy, because those sensors are really for the well-being of the people on site. Now, it is known that particles don't stop at a wall or a fence, they travel over the top. Now, what I find is sad from all this is that they seem unwilling to then say, let's put some sensors in the community where people live. It's a radical idea, this, isn't it? Where people spend, where people sleep, where people work. And I think they are, because the whole of the construction industry is focused on controlling the emissions on the site. No one likes to admit that the particles or pollution could possibly travel beyond the site, because then I think it comes, I'm not that clever a person, as you probably realize from this. I assume it's to do with the fact that they don't want to admit liability. It could be along those lines, I think, but I'm not sure on that one, because I'm only a self-taught guy. I'm not that clever, really. I'm not very well paid either. So, but there are people far cleverer and better paid than me who can understand these things. And as I got older, I realised that my brain can only I can only take in so much. And my brain's, and when you get to my age, which you will do in many years' time, you'll think, he's not bad for a 64-year-old.
Well, you're teaching us a lot, so
Yeah.
You're definitely cleverer than me.
No. I think we're all clever at different things, Mina.
Yes.
That's what it is. Yeah, we've all got our own skills and our own skill sets. I'm still looking for mine. Carry on.
Okay, so there are a couple of comments. So Joanna's asked, how can Ealing be pressured to stop the works until we know it's safe? Any ideas?
Yes. This is going to sound a bit radical. I think you've all been, now I'm a bit of a rebel, as you probably know, and I've done some things in my younger day, which I won't go into now, but I think you're far too sensible, you're far too restrained, and I think you need to, not that I'm saying you should do this, but maybe think along the lines of, what would Extinction Rebellion do? What would the Dads for Justice do? Get yourself in a position. I'm not suggesting people should do this, but consider something like, in the good old days when I was a young lad, tie yourself to the railings. I don't know, get some. I'm not suggesting you should do that. I'm not suggesting people break the law. Tim says go out there and break. But I think you've got to do something. Think outside the box a bit. Take some direct action. Get yourself noticed, get some tame and friendly journalists to film you and say, I am having a sit-down protest, I am going to chain myself to the gates of this site and I'm not moving, go on a hunger strike and do some pacifism, a bit like Gandhi would have done, yeah? Think outside of the box, don't think of being English and being polite and being nice, that ain't going to get you nowhere. You've got to, I think, take some more direct actions as a possibility. But I don't want you all tying yourselves to the gates this evening. He said, Tim Webb said it would be fine. I'm just thinking, as one suggestion perhaps, I don't know, guys. I mean, does that sound completely stupid? Have I lost the plot?
No, sounds good, sounds good. But we need, somebody said we need more people to do that though. We need more supporters.
Yes.
We did actually have 2 actions with Extinction Rebellion last year, but not at the site, at Ealing Town Hall and Southall Town Hall. And they did draw some attention. But Angela said here that Tony Pidgley agreed to monitoring in a resident's back garden and then backtracked as his insurer wouldn't allow it.
As I thought so, yes. That's along the lines I was thinking, yes. I mean, the other thing that surprises me, and I know I've spoken to Angela and Amrik in detail about this, and it's one thing that constantly surprises me, right? And I'll probably get shot down in flames for saying this, but you've got a Facebook group with 524 people, right? Where are they? What are they doing? You know, where are the other 500 people? What are they doing? Don't people want to get involved? Don't they care? Or as Amrik would say, maybe they're afraid to get involved. But it seems to me you've got a lot of people who basically just sit on the sidelines and don't do anything. Is that a fair comment?
Amrik or Angela, would you like to respond to that?
I've said the wrong thing there.
No, not at all. You know, there's times, you know, as I said in the chat, we've discussed taking more action. We've explored the idea of doing a sit-in at Ealing Town Hall. But I guess, you know, as somebody else has mentioned, we lack physical support, you know, people who are actually willing to turn up. I mean, when you look at the events outside of Southall Town Hall and Ealing Town Hall, there weren't that many Southall residents. And I have to say, you know, when it comes to campaigning on the streets, you know, going to the Gurdwaras, etc., it's always the same people who do it. And, you know, you have to recognise that we need to juggle that with family life, working life, and it can become quite draining after a while. You know, I hear what you're saying about taking direct action, but part of me feels, would that be the end of my career?
Yes, yeah, good point. Yeah, I understand.
Not that I've got much of a career.
No, Angela, no, thank you. Because I suppose the problem is, you see, when I'm looking at this, because I'm retired, I'm not out to impress people. I don't have to worry about a job, you know, my house is paid for, you know, etc., etc. So I can come out with these radical ideas, but I agree, for most people, it's fear, isn't it? It's fear of losing your job, not being able to meet your standard of living, you'll be ostracised in the community. And so I do understand. However, I still think more could be done. And I think, to answer your question in what can be done in a more legal way, I think what you need to do is to maybe get some journalists like Joe Griffin involved, or some of the local papers involved, and to somehow, I don't know how you do it, promote, I mean, you've obviously thought through this, promote your story. And the other thing I would imagine that could push it up the agenda, and I know this has been discussed before. Is it? Sorry, am I still there? Am I still here? Am I still? Can you hear me all right? Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. The other thing that might help is, my concern always has been.
We can't hear you at the moment. It's very crackly.
Is it very crackly? Oh yeah. Am I still here? Still here? Do you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Am I gone? All right. Sorry. Go on. Yeah. Am I still here?
Don't worry, we couldn't hear what you said just then, but hopefully your sound will come back. But Daljit's just said last year so many people came to the rallies. They need to be mobilised. It needs to be understood as a racial justice issue. So we need to find out how we can campaign. Oh, Darren, did you want to speak?
No, sorry, it's just your connection that's gone, I think, because we can hear Tim clearly,
but I can't hear you.
Can't hear you, so.
You can still hear me, can you?
Yeah, we can hear Tim.
Never mind.
Yes.
Never mind. sorry.
Nina's connection's gone.
No, what I would say on a serious note here, okay, now I think I always think, what would I consider doing if I was in a similar situation to you guys, and I knew there was a contaminated site? What I think I might consider doing, and maybe you guys have considered it, maybe it's a bit too, I don't know, emotional, is get some of the construction site dust that comes over from the site, get it analysed, find out what is in it, how polluted is it. There are specialists that will do that for you. Does that seem like a sensible approach? Am I talking complete cobblers? Am I missing the point? But if it was perhaps get some analysis done of what it is to find out how harmful or otherwise the soil samples are. Does that seem logical? I
was thinking the same thing when you showed that pie chart of all of the different constituents of air.
Yeah.
It's obviously too expensive to measure all of those in real time forever.
That's
but it'd be relatively cheap, I'd imagine, to take a one-off sample.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Is to get some soil analysed, and then once you've got it analysed, it might give you a clearer picture of what some of these components of the soil are, because the problem with air quality, this is the difficulty we've got, the sensors, that's even if you've got a professional sensor for PM2.5 and PM10, it won't tell you what the constituent parts of those particles are. In the air quality world, in this lovely world, we call it apportionment. Now, the holy grail of air quality is I get involved in it because I see a peak or a spike on a chart. I see some data. I get very excited by that sort of thing. And then I think to myself, I wonder what's in that air. I wonder what it consists of. Where did it come from? Where did it go? You know, what's going on there? And I think that's what fascinates me, is understanding a bit more about what the components are that you're breathing in. Whether that makes sense, or whether that's logical, I don't know, because I can look at it probably, because I don't live there, maybe I can look at it a bit more dispassionately than you guys, and from a more detached view. And maybe that's something that people, I don't know. Is it because you're afraid to find out? What does it tell me? I mean, is it something there that I've said? I apologise if I've said the wrong thing. I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend people, but is this seem something that people don't want to consider? It's all gone very quiet.
Does anybody want to respond? I don't know if anyone would know the answer to that, really.
Well, one of the questions we have asked Ealing, because it comes down to money as well. I mean, we're only a small group.
Yeah.
Funding this is quite difficult. You know, most of us don't have spare cash to keep throwing at this. So I personally have asked Julian Bell, Virendra, Sharma, and said, well, okay, if you think this site is safe, you're telling us that it's safe, it's unlikely to cause us any ill health, then out of the money that you've got from the Section 106 for monitoring, why not use some of that money, take some independent soil samples and prove to us that the soil has been remediated, is safe, and that when the wind is blowing up these dust particles and we're breathing them in, okay, prove to us that we are not breathing in these toxic chemicals still, because we are adamant that the soil is not clean. Otherwise, if it was clean, why are we still smelling it?
Can I add something here? Because I am a registered environmental health officer. I mean, I don't know in practice, I've changed my profession, but I was for 20 years a practicing environmental health officer for Barnet and Greenwich when I lived in South London. So I can't understand any of this because, I mean, you've mentioned, Angela, about it being a statutory nuisance under the Environmental Protection Act. But I mean, who was saying it isn't? Because also, back in the day, I mean, this is back in the 90s when the Act first came out, but I was an expert witness for a local authority, for local residents, taking action against the local authority under statutory nuisance, under that Act. And it was a big thing at the time when the Act first came out. It was about mould growth in council properties. And there was lots of cases where individuals took action against the council because of the harmful effects of the mould growth grown in their premises. And the reason why I was appointed by the council as an expert witness is because sometimes people were genuine cases and sometimes they were just jumping on the bandwagon. So from that perspective, we used to go in, and in fact, we didn't agree with the housing department. We were quite individual, even though we were employed by them. And we used to say, this is a real case, you need to do something about it now before the council's prosecuted. Or we'd say, no, they haven't, or you haven't, it's the tenant's own fault that this has happened because they've got loads of clothes drying in the middle of the room and they've not opened any of the windows, and there's boiling pans in the kitchen with the doors wide open. So we used to say that, and we used to be the expert witness in those cases. I used to be an expert witness in that case. It's the same act, it's the same piece of legislation, it's statutory nuisance. But they were taking cases as individuals against the council under the Act.
Can I ask what the result was of that case? Can you remember?
No, there was hundreds of cases, and half of them won and half of them lost. That's why I was an expert witness. I was an expert witness on an ongoing basis for several years over the course of the 90s, because when the Act first came out, this was a big thing to do under it, was, oh, now we can do something about the mould growth in our council properties. And lots of people had genuine cases and won the Act. Most of it, because we were the expert witness, most of it was dealt with before it got to court, because we used to say, hey, housing department, you've got a real issue here, do something about it. Or, you know, this will never win in court, tell the tenants to get on with it. And get on with repairs, I mean, not get on with it in a negative way. But
and how would the residents go about doing that?
Well, because it was their, no, it was different from this. It was their fault. So they were causing the mould growth by drying loads of soaking wet clothes indoors, not opening any windows, not putting the heating on, and boiling loads of pans in the kitchen of hot water without opening any windows and leaving all the doors open. So sometimes.
Did you have any, sorry to interrupt, did you have any experience of a similar situation like this or not?
It was the same piece of the Act. It's statutory nuisance. It's statutory nuisance. The Act says if it has to be prejudicial to health, it has to be a nuisance under common law. So a nuisance under common law, right? If you look at the definition of nuisance under law, it's something that impacts on a neighbour's property. So this is the neighbour. The neighbours of this company are the residents of Southall, because they're neighbours. But under a statutory nuisance, it can't just be the same as a common law nuisance. There has to be some health implications. So you have to prove that it's your neighbours causing the problem, which it isn't this case, because the company are the neighbours to the residents of Southall, and because there's a health implication. So that's what you've got to prove in court. Now, we used to have independent environmental health officers in those days taking a case for the tenants, and we used to advise the council internally. But it's a very different situation, but it's the same Act. It's the same part of the Act. It's the same section under the Act.
Sure, lovely, thank you.
It's statutory nuisance.
Yes, Angela has said that they are waiting for advice from an environmental solicitor. So they are getting help in the legal process.
But I used to enforce the law. I used to enforce it. I enforced the statutory nuisance under the Environmental Health Protection Act. I did it every day. It was my bread and butter for years.
Maybe you could help the group then and give some advice outside of this that I think
quite more than happy to. I mean, I haven't done it for a number of years, but the law hasn't changed. The law's the same law. Yeah.
Same law.
I mean, laws are updated, but the Environmental Protection Act came out in 1990 and it hasn't been changed since. I mean, there'll be case law, so it'll have developed probably a bit more since I last enforced it, but it's quintessentially the same law as I enforced every day of my life for years.
Okay, lovely, thank you. That's useful information.
Yeah.
I'm just conscious of the time, so do we have any other questions for Tim?
Have I frightened you all?
How can we find out more about Tim? Where are you? Are you on Twitter? Are you on the web? Where?
No, I purposely keep on the Twitter because when I sometimes put my comments forward, you might find this hard to believe that people don't always accept them. And I tend to be a bit of a maverick with some of the things I do and say, because after all, first thing is you've got to say, what's a guy like me in South East London doing involved with a group in Southall? And the answer is because it's the second time I've been through this, if you like. I was with another group before this, a group in Hackney, who had similar problems. The difference there was it was a much smaller site, and they had a massive cloud of toxins released from the site towards a school. That got in the Hackney, whatever it was, Hackney Gazette, whatever it was. And I got in touch with them, and they actually did something where the developers provided some off-site monitoring near the school, because it was such a problem. Because what the press don't like, as I repeat this again, you can upset and poison people like me. No one really cares. But if you've got a young school child, no, seriously, this is serious stuff. A young child, and you've got a young family or a school mom, and as soon as their health or their children's health is compromised, and it goes to a whole different level. That's what you've got to bear in mind. So I think what you need is some kind of, I don't know, you've got to put it the emotional heartstrings a bit more. And maybe someone like Joe Griffin would take this on board. I know, obviously she's got commissions she works to as well, because I think this is going to be an ongoing problem. Because if you look at the wider aspects of this, there are more and more of these sites in London being brought to bear because we've got a housing shortage, and they're bringing more sites into use that really, honestly, should never be considered for human habitation. That's my view on it. But they're so desperate for land in London that they're willing to ignore that, and everybody wants, it's a bit like the old song, isn't it? Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Everybody wants a cheap house, but nobody wants it on a contaminated site. It's a very, very difficult angle, very difficult story, this one. And I think that what I'd say you guys have done is first class. I've hats off, I'll take my hat off to you. You've done a tremendous job. You're in a very difficult situation. And the problem is the law is the wrong way round. It should be, they have to prove to you that the air is clean. You shouldn't be having to prove to them. It's completely the wrong way round, but that's the legislation we're in, because it's fairly obvious to most people, because air quality works on the assumption no data means there's a problem. And the fact that you're not seeing any information or a reluctance to provide any monitoring, apart from the monitoring that I do, indicates to me you are absolutely right. You are faced with a problem. You've got health issues as well to consider as well for you, your children and your forebears. And once these PM2.5 particles enter your body, there's a danger they may not leave your bodies ever, full stop. And that's what drives me on, is because I care about situations like this. And I see a tremendous social injustice. And one thing that winds me up is when people tell me there isn't a problem, or they refuse to acknowledge there is a problem. And you all know, and I know, there's fundamentally an issue. And you're all right. You're absolutely right with what you're doing. You're in a very difficult situation. And the problem is that you've got to prove health. I tell you what you also need as well. You need some kind of medical evidence as well. You need a proper survey, what they call a cohort study. Is that what it's called, a cohort study?
Tim, they are doing that already. They have got somebody involved.
Yeah, and that's what it is. I think because what I fear, and this is going to happen in Southall, it's going to happen in other sites as well, by bringing these contaminated sites back into operation again, they are unleashing an awful lot of problems for the future. But the difficulty is no one wants to hear that, because we're in the middle of a housing crisis and we've got to provide more, I call it unaffordable housing for people. This is the problem we've got in London. I mean, it's not an easy one, Guy. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a self-taught air monitoring guy. So what do I know, Mina?
You know a lot more than I do. So does anybody have any further questions or comments? Because I think otherwise we're getting to 8:15. I think that's a good time to call it a night, not a day.
Yeah, past my bedtime soon.
Something quickly. It's not really, it's a comment, so I don't really.
Yes.
But I did work for.
Oh, can't hear her.
Your sound.
No, I'm here. I'm back. I did work for Greenwich Council, and Greenwich Council did actually have Gasworks on it, and they did do some cleaning up of that Gasworks site. Now I could find out for my old colleagues a little bit about that, because I know there wasn't any issue, and they would have had the same toxins because it was a Gasworks site. So I could follow that up with some friends from that borough that I'm still in touch with.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Do you have? Are you in touch with the C.A.S.H group? Or do you need their
Got
contact?
Angela's email address for being in Friends of the Earth from previously. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. That would be great.
Yeah.
And can I just say, Mina, sorry, and thanks for listening, guys. It's not the easiest topic in the world to get your head around. I've been studying it now for about 3 years or so, and I can only give you my perspective on it. Okay, I give you my opinions. I could be wide of the mark on certain things to do with the policies, but what I am seeing and am continuing to see are very unusual peaks or spikes of dust that is travelling over from the side. I've had my sensors in place for a year or more, and what I would like to do is to find out what's happened to this independent air monitoring person. I'd like to meet them, actually. I'd like to meet them.
Same here.
Same here, and find out what they're up to, Angela. Yeah. And also the other thing as well, one other thing I would say as well, right? I'll give you Tim's story, right? It's Tim's very sad story to end on, okay? But not that sad. Okay? Now, I wanted to find out how accurate my homemade monitors were. And so I signed up for a project, and they loaned me a monitor worth about £10,000. I thought, this is marvellous. Monitor on the side of my wall worth £10,000. I can see for the first time how accurate my monitors are compared to a proper professional air monitor. And they never let me get to see the data. So I would say that when you do get the monitoring, if you do get the monitoring, you need to nail them down and say, we want full public access to the data. We want to see real-time or continuous monitoring wherever possible. We don't want this diffusion tube nonsense, which just gives you an average for the month. You can't tell where the peaks are. And I think that's what you've got to bear in mind, that when they offer you the monitoring, you need to nail down how you're going to see the data, because everything I do when I investigate air monitoring is driven by, show me the data, give me the evidence. I want to see what the peaks are at a certain time. I want to know what's going on. I want to know and understand a bit more about what's causing this and where the pollutants are coming from. Look at the wind direction, the wind speed, etc. You need all that as well. So it's not just a matter of here's your monitor, because they might restrict access to it. That was my sad story. There we are.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Tim. It's been really interesting.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you to Amrik as well, and Angela for your participation as well. And obviously we'll keep working towards getting some sort of a resolution that people can be happy with. Elizabeth, you said you've got similar problems down there as well, so that's another area to look at. So if there are no further comments or questions, I think we'll... Oh, Tim, would you mind making me host again?
Oh, yeah.
Just go down to the bottom of your screen.
Yeah,
and click on participants.
Manage hold on.
Participants, and you'll see Ealing Green Party with.
Hold on. This is good. Yes, Tim Webb, good on air monitoring,
and,
not with hold on, participants. Yeah, got it. Yeah.
Yes.
Ealing Green Party. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, and then click on more if you look to the.
Got it. Right. Yeah.
And it'll say make host.
Make host. There. Yes, you're hosting now.
That's it. Lovely. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. And if you do have any further questions or comments or anything you'd like to find out, do contact us on our website, Ealing Green Party. This will be up, the recording of this will be up on our website. So if you missed any of it, you can watch it there. But thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. We're hoping to do these once a month.
Right.
Finding different topics to chat about. So last month we had Save Gurnell and Warren Farm on, saving Warren Farm as well. So I'm not sure yet if we've decided what next month's topic will be, but
I think it's going to be citizens' assemblies, isn't it?
okay. Oh yeah, that's right. Citizens' assemblies and something else, and Hanwell Future.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so do look out for our promotion of these, and we look forward to seeing you. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a lovely evening. And thank you especially to Tim and Amrik and Angela. Thank you very much.
And don't all go tying, and don't all go tying yourself to the railings, please.
Tim, whereabouts in South East London are you from?
Well, I'm not from South East London, my dear. I'd be from Devon originally. I'm not from these parts, as you can probably realise, my dear,
Yeah.
my lover. No, I live near Bromley in South East London. Yeah.
Ah, yes.
And then that's so. What's a guy like me doing involved with a group in Southall? It's because when I saw the TV article, it sort of struck a chord with me. Here is a group of people who appear to be taken advantage of. And one thing that annoys me in life is when I see a basic social injustice, and I've got a lot of time for two parties in life, okay? Now, there's only two parties who take an interest in these sort of environmental affairs, and one of them is the Green Party. And I've got tremendous respect for the work that Jeremy and all his colleagues do within the Green Party, because they're one of the few parties which actually get involved in these sort of issues and take an interest. The other mainstream parties generally do not want to touch this with a barge pole. There's only one other party I found that, apart from the Green Party, which is interested. That's the Liberal Democrats as well. But the Tories aren't interested, Labour aren't interested either. I have to say, sorry, it's based on my experience, okay? Because all the years when I've been, last 3 years, when I've been following air quality and learning about it, I've had visitations for the Liberal Democrats and for the Green Party. The other parties, like Greenpeace, don't give a monkeys. Friends of the Earth, they haven't got any time of day for it. The Tories couldn't be bothered. Labour Party can't be bothered at all. This is only based on my experience, okay? And so I would say from the Green Party, well done on organising this, guys. And it's very, very good that you've got people talking about these issues, because I see in life there are three fundamental things we all need to be aware of. Number one, we want to know what's in our food, so it's safe to eat. We want to know what's in our water, so it's safe to drink. And the final thing, we all deserve to know what's in the air we're breathing, because that is vital. Those are the three vital things. And what drives me on is that I believe each of us should be aware and should be made aware what it is we're breathing. And if it's something harmful, I want to find out who the people are who are poisoning my air. I take it personally, and you guys should as well.
Fantastic. That's a good note to end on.
Thank you.
So thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Take care.
Night.
Cheers.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.